Marcello Bonini. I live in Reggio Emilia. Many of the people that I see online right now have had a trip with me, either in Toscana or on Bike Across Italy. So there's a lot of people I have to toast to and say, nice to see you, Anthony, Brent, Geoff, the Millers, and who else do we have here? A lot of people. I hope I don't forget anybody. Alan, Dave McMillan, and anyway, as Lauren said, I've led this trip many times. I think I am over 50 times for Ciclismo Classico, and I have led it quite a few times on my own for my friends as well. It's a trip that goes coast to coast in central Italy. We will soon see the map, and goes through different areas, through different historical periods, and through different cultural periods that are very significant in the history of Italy. Lately, I have done this trip many times with my friend Massimo Gianangeli from Roma. Massimo, do you want to say something about you?
Ciao a tutti. Hi, everybody. I'm not as expert as Marcello is on the Bike Across Italy, but I've been lucky enough to lead it with him 4 or 5 times now. I joined Ciclismo Classico a few years ago, and Bike Across Italy has been my first trip with the company, and I instantly fell in love with the trip and the company as well. Ciclismo Bike Across Italy to me has a lot of meanings, and every time we ride it with Marcello, we find another story to tell our guests, because there are so many points throughout the way, historical, artistical, and going on in the kitchen, the culinary, the wines, and everything else. Tonight we'll try to re-evoke some of the best moments we go through on the Bike Across Italy.
Bene, before we begin, we have a little slideshow to show you. One peculiarity of tonight's event is that we have called it a virtual journey with real flavors. And one of the reasons is we will try to explain about the wines that we usually drink on tour and about the recipes. And since drinking is admitted, as we don't have to drive, we will drink some of the wines we usually drink when we are on tour, as we do this slideshow. So let's begin with oops, sorry, wrong screen. This is the right one. Let's begin with the show. Massimo, si vede? Do we see the slideshow? Okay. We need to go back one.
Okay.
This is Bike Across Italy, a virtual journey with real flavors. From the Adriatic coast to the Argentario Peninsula. So we start east and we go west. First slide, it's Italy. These are the 20 regions of Italy, each one of them with its own, come si dice, most important town. This is a map of Italy. Massimo, stiamo seguendo, giusto?
Sì, sì.
This is a map of Italy at the time of the Romans, of the Roman Empire. And the reason we show this slide to you is because Bike Across Italy, for more than half of its itinerary, follows the purple line that goes east to west, from Ancona to Roma. In fact, if you look at the itinerary of Bike Across Italy that starts in Pesaro, you can see it almost goes over the Via Flaminia, other than the last part just before Roma, we veer west towards the coast of Toscana. You can see Lauren said that she would never have imagined climbs as she then found in Italy and in central Italy. You see that every stage of bike across Italy has some kind of climbing. I don't want you to be scared by the elevation profile, because we're not talking about climbs like the Alps. We don't have terrible, severe climbs. But as you can see, Italy, it's a humpback country. Virtually throughout the trip, other than after Spello, which is from Spello towards Toady, there is virtually no flat terrain all the way from Pesaro to L'Argentario. So we're talking about 10 days and 9 rides. In Spello, which is in Umbria, in the middle of the ride, there is a 2-night stay where we have a rest day. Of course, we offer an optional ride on the rest day as well, but people have a chance to take a day off from the saddle and walk around Spello and relax before the second half of the trip. Then, if we move over to the next slide, we see Pesaro. Pesaro is, again, on the Adriatic coast, a town of about 95,000 residents, famous for tourism. This is Pesaro Beach. I don't know if you can spot how tight the umbrellas are on the beach. Pesaro is also famous for the music, for Rossini. This is the theater of Pesaro, Gioacchino Rossini. Rossini was born in Pesaro, and he was a very early talent of music. He composed this first opera at the age of 12, and he has become extremely popular around the world with Il Barbiere di Siviglia and so on. In Pesaro, we also start to see art. This is right off by the hotel. This is the sphere by Arnaldo Pomodoro, one of the most important come si dice, contemporary sculptures of Italy. And this is one of his many spheres. I think there is one in Chicago as well that shows how the world is complex just underneath a very smooth outside, come si dice, crust. If you just scratch the surface and you go to the inside, the world is very complicated. But Pesaro is also known for a national park that sits right near Pesaro. And this is where we do our first day warm-up ride that goes to the natural park of the Monte San Bartolo, which is the only promontory between Venice and about 500 kilometers south. So we go there and we climb the only cliff on the sea between Venice and the, come si dice, Il Conero. This is the first wine, the wine we chose to represent Le Marche, Il Gaio Spino, which is a white wine out of a Verdicchio grape. It comes from Iesi, which is just a little bit south of Pesaro, and for many, many, many years, it was the only wine known from the region Le Marche, which is not famous. It was not famous up to a few years ago for the wines. This is a very beautiful little fattoria, a little farm that produces this organic wine. And it's, again, 100% Verdicchio grape. It does have a lot of scents and a lot of flavors. It's a wine that we usually drink on day 2 when we arrive in Urbino, and it goes well with, you know, all the seafood, all the first courses, also some kind of tasty cheese as it sits for 16, 18 months in large oak barrels. So Massimo, salute.
Chin. So in when we're in Pesaro, we have a taste of the culinary tradition from this Marche region, uh, which is lucky enough to have seafood and wonderful product and gorgeous products from the inland. One of the dishes we usually try is pasta con le cicale, which is spaghetti with what I believe is called peacock shrimp. Is a very strange shrimp coming from the Adriatic Sea, which is basically a pond between Italy and Yugoslavia. Not very deep, but is rich in pesce azzurro, anchovies, sardines, small fish, but very healthy for especially people practicing sports. And vongole, clams, which are smaller than the ones you use in the US, and also this kind of shrimps. So it's a very simple recipe. They stir fry some garlic, anchovies, oil. They throw in the shrimps and some cherry tomatoes, and they toss the pasta. Usually they add half a glass of white wine. It's nice, it's quick, and it's tasty. The only problem with this kind of shrimp is they're very spiky. So most of the time, I remember when using them in the kitchen, we used to trim them with scissors before cooking them. Otherwise, the customers would cut their hands and lips trying to eat them. But they're very tasty. Marche is also famous for roasted meat. Um, some kind of strange animals say. I tell you this because my parents come from La Marche, so I know a lot about the strange traditions they have at the table. They like stuffed pigeon, which sounds very strange, but we're not talking about the pigeons usually people feeds in Piazza San Marco in Venice or St. Peter's Square in Rome. They're a different breed, properly raised for human consumption. Also in Le Marche, polenta is very common at the table. And I remember still my mom reminds me that when she was a kid, polenta was a staple almost every day. So Marche is also famous because it's the cradle of organic food. Um, the as you can see from these slides, the landscape is still what it was, I would say, a century or more ago. Not much has changed, with the exception of a few important towns and cities. This is Montefabri, which we pass by on our ride to Urbino, and we usually take 10 minutes time to climb inside the walls and have a very quick stroll around. It's very peaceful, sometimes looks like a ghost town, but it's not. There are a couple of bars as well. And this is on the way to Pesaro. This is a sculpture that Marcello likes a lot. So
See, on the way to Urbino, this is day
Urbino,
2,
sorry.
from Pesaro to Urbino. As we approach Urbino, which is a town famous for its art, in the middle of nowhere, out in the countryside, you see this installation by Gianni Calcagnini, and the name of it is "The Thought It's Faster Than Your Actions." So this horse who's jumping over a globe represents the power of our thoughts, of our imagination, that a man can only barely hold on to, trying not to be thrown away. And this is a sign of power that moves the human being. And I say that as we move towards Urbino, we do feel the art, because Urbino very much like Firenze, even if it's less known than Firenze, it's a town of the Renaissance. This that you see right now on your screen, it's the home of the Duke Federico da Montefeltro. We're talking about the mid 1400s. The mid 1400s, when Firenze was blowing with Medici, and for the first time in history, the home of, come si dice, a lord of war, it's not a castle anymore, but it's a civilian palace, a civilian building with a very nice courtyard inside, a collection of paintings coming from all over the world. And this is the man we're talking about, Federico da Montefeltro, who was born in Gubbio and ruled in central Italy up until the end of the 1400s. Inside Palazzo Ducale, we go and visit on day 2 some of the masterpieces of the Renaissance. This is an unknown, supposedly unknown artist, the Ideal City. We think it's Luciano Laurana. This is Piero della Francesca, the flagellation of Christ. And this is what we do in Urbino before we leave to go towards the Grotte di Frasassi.
We leave Urbino and we get on the Via Flaminia. And the Via Flaminia is the one picture right here, and it was the one on the right on the previous slide. So on the label on the wall on the left is written that this tunnel, this gallery, has been opened by Vespasiano, Roman emperor, in year 76 before Christ. And there is a smaller one on the right hand side made by the Etruscans, but the Romans that came later wanted something bigger for their chariots and army to go through. So the Gola del Furlo follows the river, and we get to Cagli. This as well here is the Via Flaminia, and this is a Roman bridge on the river that is not there anymore now because the course has been deviated. And this is the main square in Cagli with the municipal building. Usually here we stop and we go to taste some food from the few restaurants here and there.
What is interesting here, Massimo, if you carefully look at the facade, you see that there are many, come si dice, doors that were filled or windows that have changed position. And this really tells you about the stratification of the different historical periods. A building that has lasted 1,000 years like this, usually like a book, tells you about the history of the place. You can read the facade of a building and understand what happened through the centuries.
This is the red gorge, Golarosa, and the mountain on your right actually contains the Grotte di Frasassi, which is a natural marvel because the river on top and the waters rich in sulfur from the bottom, they join together and they started corroding the rocks inside. So now the mountain is almost empty with the river flowing many meters below the street level. And inside, all the water from the millennia of rains percolating inside created these caves with stalagmites and stalactites. There are many rooms inside. We are lucky enough to have a visit early in the morning, so that the caves are all for us. And actually, we are the only group allowed to take pictures inside the grotto. There are many rooms inside, all of them with different colors and water flowing and percolating, and they form this kind of sculptures. Some of them have been named after things they resemble. I remember, just to name a few, I remember Santa Claus, I remember Dante Alighieri's face, I remember also the witch, and the Grotta
Yes,
di
yes. It's usually fun. It's gorgeous. It's spectacular. But to tour inside the grottos, it's also fun. I think Lauren wants to say something, Massimo.
Sorry,
Lauren?
just real quickly. Of course, this is, Genga. This is La Grotta di Frasassi. It's located in Genga. Yes, and as you can see, it's spectacular. And for those of you who've been to grottos around the world, if you remember, a lot of times when oxygen gets inside of them, a lot of these grottos sort of turn brownish. And I think what makes this one special, one, it's enormous. And two, they really did quite a phenomenal job of creating all these chambers before you get to the grotto. So the experience is quite spectacular. But I did want to say something about, again, my first time there. When I arrived, I could not, like I said, I was just blown away by Italy's beauty. And Genga in particular, it's just a really special geography. And I'll never forget, I was at, the dinner table with all my cousins and stuff, and learning about my grandmother, Beatrice, and her journey. She left at 18 from this town, and very big town, very big village, so friendly. And there were a lot of people left there. And I just asked, I mean, sort of like a naive question, I guess, but I was only 23 at the time. And I just said, well, why on earth would why would anybody leave this place? You really do ask that question. For older generations, it's pretty clear, but for a young person, for me, it was sort of an obvious question. And they said, of course, they couldn't wait to leave because of the poverty. And so the grotto was discovered in 1971, I think, around that time. Yeah. So before the grotto was there, the town had nothing. It was just poverty, hunger, poverty. No industry. Now Le Marche is has a lot of industry going, the shoe industry, a lot of small cottage industries. And then La Grotta literally employed all of my cousins and all of their family. There's all little, so basically this one grotto, which is in fact very beautiful, and they did a great job preserving it, did in fact, of course, my grandmother, died 9 years later at age, I don't know, 75 or something, but she never made it home again. And really interestingly enough too, as any of you have sort of done an immigrant experience, which I really encourage you to do, oftentimes the people you left, which meaning my Italian family, knew more about my grandmother and knew more about my family than we know about them, which is kind of very typical, sort of sad, but again, makes it much more meaningful if you ever want to kind of reach to your roots, because they really made a very big effort to try to, understand like who we are and our family here in the United States. And I learned a lot about my cousins and so forth. And I brought all that information back home again. But I never forget. And she took a train from Genga all the way to, I think, Genova, and then took a 6-week boat trip. So a classic immigrant experience. But anyway, I just wanted to, talk a moment about that experience and what it meant to me. So it's quite a beautiful place. So anyway, sorry for the pause there.
Grazie, Lauren. I think this is extremely
and one more thing too was the way Marcello, the way they discovered the grotto. Was really interesting too, that they were walking, a bunch of hikers were walking on top of that mountain that Massimo said, and they saw this puff of air come up from the mountain. And they said, okay, that's interesting. And they dropped, again, this is pretty factual, I think, because they keep telling the story over and over again. So they dropped the stone. They dropped the stone down this hole, and it took a while, and it landed, and they just right away figured, wow, beneath us, we've got this, something going on here. And that's when they began the excavation. So that's, And
then a few days later, they got there with a rope and a rope ladder and a couple of, battery lights, flashlights. And they started to go down, but they couldn't reach the bottom. So they came after a few days later again with a longer rope ladder and more equipment, and they finally landed on the bottom of this huge room, which is called Infinity Room right now, if you take the tour, which is the largest room of caves in Europe.
It's like it's how long is the whole grotto? Isn't it like 2 or 3 miles or even longer, right?
It's 4 kilometers, I think, and it's the Infinity Room is 370 feet.
But how long is the length of the Grotto di Frasassi? The entire length of it? 4 miles, 4 kilometers?
3 or 4 kilometers. There are few rooms that are not open to the general public. There is also some speleological experience, but you need to put on a proper suit and fins and everything else, because it's something expert level. But yeah, it's quite deep, and the tunnel, only the tunnel to get into the first room, it's 700 meters, so it's quite a long walk.
It's very impressive.
Anyway,
okay.
Grazie, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. Before we move on, I want to recap this first part, because I am sure that people who have been on Bike Across Italy already can put their thoughts together, but I'm not sure about those who have not. So the trip starts in Pesaro on the Adriatic coast, on the eastern coast of Italy. On day 2, we ride inland to Urbino. This is the image of Urbino. And in Urbino, we discover the life of a Renaissance, because Urbino was built by this man here, Duke Federico di Montefeltro, in the middle of the 1400s, more or less 1450s. On day 3, we move to the Grotte di Frasassi. And the morning of day 4, before we move into Umbria, we take a visit in the immense caves of Frasassi. And then we face the mountains that border the Marche and Umbria. And we arrive in Gubbio. In Gubbio, we see a totally different town. We call it the City of Stone, because Urbino, city of the Renaissance, 1400, was built with bricks. Gubbio, a medieval city, 1200, was built with big stones. Gubbio is also a destination of the first Bike Across Italy of the season, the Bike Across Italy that starts on May 11, that visits Gubbio for one of the most incredible festivals of the world. This slide here shows the main square of Gubbio filled with people, all of them wearing a specific color suit, that are taking a specific piece of tradition around town. This is La Corsa dei Ceri. May 15 every year, we used to have a tour that goes there to see this incredible festival, a festival that it's about 900 years old. It started in 1163 when the bishop, which is now the patron saint of the town, died, Ubaldo Baldassini, and it has been carried on for all this time. It changed throughout the years. It became a great day for the people who live there. And it consists in carrying around 3 big statues of the 3 saints of town, Sant'Ubaldo first, San Giorgio second, and Sant'Antonio III, representing the guilds of the most powerful people of the town in the past. They bring these big obelisks around town the whole day to just party together. We usually had a departure, and unfortunately this year the festival will not happen, so the trip will not happen as well. But we usually have a trip that hits Gubbio for May 15 for La Festa dei Ceri. We are in Umbria, the second region we go through with our trip, and we usually spend one day in Gubbio. After Gubbio, We go up and down the mountain. This is day 5, Gubbio to Spello. And we go to Spello, which is known for the olive trees and the olive oil. And we arrive in another village that has Roman ruins. This is Cortavenere Inspello, built by the Romans, very extremely interesting. And here we enter the world of the olive oil, because all around Umbria there are acres and acres and acres of slopes that are cultivated with what we call the gold of Umbria, the gold of Spello, which is the olive oil. Very briefly, I want to repeat something that I already have explained in my previous cooking lesson. Italy has a huge biodiversity. We have about 650 grapes, out of which you can legally produce wine. And we have about 370 varieties of olives, out of which you can legally produce olive oil. The area of Spello and Assisi is famous for the Moraiola and Leccino type of olives that produce an incredible, perfumed, tasty olive oil. Spello, the town where we spent 2 nights, day 5 and day 6, it's also famous for another popular festival that takes place on what you call Corpus Christi. We call it Corpus Domini, which is a religious holiday which is calculated upon Easter, where the people from Spello decorate the main street of Spello with petal flowers. What you see here down on the ground are paintings that are made with petal flowers. And believe it or not, you cannot dice the petal flowers, the flowers petals. So all of these colors are obtained via natural flowers. And that means that the week before Corpus Christi, which is usually at the beginning of June, people go around the fields to collect the flowers, to take the petals, to fill the boxes, to make the paintings. Then, on day 6, which is the rest day, we go to Assisi, the nearby town, which is the spiritual and religious center of Italy.
As you know, Assisi is made famous by St. Francis, and it is a special experience to walk through this actually medieval town now, but the first settlement of Assisi were there since the Roman. So as you can see, there are many bell towers. All of them represent a church, which has some special meanings throughout the life of Saint Francis and also Santa Chiara. This one is the upper basilica with the frescoes by Giotto. All these paintings, these frescoes, sorry, are amazing when seen in real life. And this is the fresco of St. Francis, because is on the lower basilica. There is his tomb, the place where he's tumulated, with the 4 brothers, which he spent most of his life with. And there are frescoes on the walls depicting his life, his miracles, and all the major happenings throughout his life. Okay, now, as you well know, this is the map of Italy with this particular boot shape. These are all the regions of Italy. They're not states, they're not counties. We call them regions, are a bit bigger. We have 20 of them, and and these are the dialects that are spoken in Italy. We're talking about more than 30 dialects, so on for 20 regions. Some of them are very close to the Italian language, as uh, the Toscano, the Tuscan dialect spoken in Florence and throughout Tuscany. So every Italian that goes to Tuscany will understand what they say. Uh, it is a lot different if we're talking about the Sardinia, which is the island on the left-hand side, where if they speak the proper dialect, I would not understand a single word. Same goes for Calabria or Sicily sometimes. Um, so this is to show that Italy is a country that came to unity over a long time, and from people with a lot of different traditions, starting from the language. I would say that one common,
Massimo,
yes.
keep going. No, keep going.
Uh, to me, a couple of languages are spoken throughout the country, which is good food and good wine. uh,
Massimo,
but
I just wanna go back for a second here and to to stress the importance of what you said. Uh, Italy, it's a very old culture, but a very young nation. And the very first piece of literature in Italian language was the poem by St. Francis. We have a picture here, Il Cantico degli Animali, the poem to the animals. So again, 20 regions, over 30 different dialects. And when Italian language came through, it was between the 1200 and the 1300, thanks to San Francesco and Dante. Day 7, we move from Assisi and Spello. We move west. We go through Bevagna. Bevagna, very interesting. We have a very fun stopover in Bevagna by our friend Francesco, who shows us how paper was made in the medieval period. And this is Francesco in his medieval suit. We spend about an hour there, and then we move on to the center of Umbria. This takes me to the second wine of tonight's wine tasting. We are in the middle of Umbria, and we chose a very peculiar and unknown wine, which is Sagrantino di Montefarco, to represent Umbria. Sagrantino is a grape that only grows in the area around Montefalco. This is a Colle Piano by Arnaldo Caprai. If you like very powerful wines, if you like tannins, you need to try the Sagrantino from Caprai, because this is extremely strong, extremely intense, and very, very, very fruity. Montefalco, it is the town we go through on day 7. And Massimo, what do we do when we arrive in Montefalco?
well, first of all, we start late because we want to get to Montefalco at lunchtime. Montefalco is not far from Spello, so usually me and Marcello we try to slow down the pace of the ride, because on the central
Why?
square on the central square of Montefalco, which it is already beautiful by itself, and it's a wonderful place to sit down and relax. There's a restaurant that serves the best gnocchi al Sagrantino of the world, I would say. So we try to get there at lunchtime and sit down at the table just for a glass of Sagrantino and try this gnocchi. Gnocchi, of course, are made with potatoes and flowers, and the delicate sauce is made with Sagrantino, and I think is already in Ciclismo Classico archives, Marcello's lesson cooking gnocchi Sagrantino. So we can all ask Lauren for the link to that. Also,
yes,
Umbria has a great traditions in good food, simple food, a lot of sausages and salamis, but also black truffle, lamb, and lentils. There's a peculiar kind of lentil, is lenticchia di Castelluccio, which is a small lentil, and it's considered to be one of the best lentil of its kind. It's too bad Castelluccio was struck by the earthquake a few years ago, and it's still under reconstructions, but the fields where the lentils are cultivated are still there, and people are still producing what is in Italy. It's mostly used around New Year's Eve, and it's also particular for bike riders because it's a beautiful place to ride when the lentils blossom.
So we are on day we are on day 7 of this virtual trip. We are in the middle of Umbria. Umbria, it is considered the green heart of Italy for many reasons. First of all, for its spiritual value, because of Assisi and St. Francis. Massimo explained a little bit about it before. But also because Umbria is rich and abundant in woods and forests, very little industries in Umbria, a lot of hills up and down. So on day 7, we move from Montefalco to Toady. This is Toady, and if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, you see there's a large cupola. That's a church built and designed by Bramante, the famous architect. And the hotel we stay at, it's just on the left side of the cupola. In fact, the name of the hotel is called Bramante. After Toady, this is Tody's main square, another medieval town, very similar to the main square of Gubbio, if you remember the white building that sits in the main square of Gubbio. After Toady, we go on a beautiful ridge. For many of the Ciclismo guides, day 8, Toady to Orvieto, it's the best ride of the trip. This is one of the views you have from that ride. This is the castle of a little village of Prodo, where we usually stop in the morning for old school cappuccino. After which we arrive in Orvieto. We're still in Umbria. Orvieto, it's another unique city. I don't know if you can understand from this picture here, from this perspective, but Orvieto sits on a high plateau of a very soft and porous volcanic rock, which is called tufo. But the reason Orvieto is famous, other than being almost impregnable, how do you say, Lauren? Not easy to conquer, impregnable. Let's in other words, people who wanted to unconquerable. People who wanted to conquer the city had a very hard time to reach the city because it sits up on a high plateau. Orvieto is famous because of the Duomo, who was meant to be the most beautiful church in the world. Started in 1260 something and only finished at the beginning of the 15th century. It took 300 years, more or later, to build the most beautiful church in the world, where we go inside and see the frescoes by Luca Signorelli, who represent the apex of Renaissance. If we go back to our virtual tour, we said that Urbino, it was a city built on the Renaissance in the 1400s, Orvieto is much older, but these frescoes were made by Luca Signorelli at the beginning of the 1500s when Renaissance was at its apex. So we go inside the Duomo of Orvieto and we try to understand the significance of the frescoes of the San Brizio chapel inside the Duomo. After Orvieto, we descend from the cliff, and what happens, Massimo?
We go down the Tevere Valley, which is the river that flows eventually through Rome. And then we go up again towards the Lake Bolsena, which is, we are now in Lazio region, the region of Rome. Uh, and Bolsena is one of the many volcanic lake scattered all around this region. This is a view from the road up top before descending into Bolsena. Bolsena is where uh, it's connected to Orvieto because in the 1200s, a miracle happened in Bolsena to a priest, and the bishop wanted the piece of holy bread to be stored in the Duomo, which was that's why he ordered to build the Duomo in Orvieto. Bolsena here is by the lake. From Bolsena we go to Pitigliano, and when we go to Pitigliano we enter Tuscany, which brings us to the Tuscan wines.
Allora, the third wine we are drinking tonight, it is a super Tuscan from the area of Bolgheri. Bolgheri is the area of southern Tuscany. We're not in the province of Siena, where you can have a Chianti Classico or a Brunello di Montalcino. We're south of that, and we are drinking a wine that comes from a very, very small producer. The name of the producer is Giovanni Chiappini, who has a property next to Ornellaia. Those of you that are into wines, especially wines from Toscana, you know what Ornellaia is. So Gualdo de Gemoli, which is this bottle here, it's grown about 100 feet from the Ornellaia vines. This is not come si dice, a blend that is typical from Tuscany. This is a blend that is typical from France, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot. These are not indigenous grapes from Toscana. This is what we call the Bordolese blend that found a niche environment in this part of Toscana that makes it glorious. This is round, perfumed, tasty, deep, long finish, whatever adjective you can use from the movie Sideways, it actually applies to this wine here. So, going back to our entrance to Toscana, we arrived in Pitigliano. Massimo, how nice is Pitigliano?
Well, actually, Pitigliano made a triple thread with Sovana and Sorano, which are three small towns built on tuffo rock. Pitigliano being the most flashing one because it's built another like Orvieto on a plateau. So it's not that difficult to get into Pitigliano because we come from up high, and we have usually we stop for lunch inside and we take a stroll throughout the small roads, the small streets inside Pitigliano, which is also known as the Little Jerusalem because used to have a Jewish ghetto during the difficult times. Those measures were took places in Italy. So the ghetto is still there, is well preserved. There's also a working synagogue, and Pitigliano every year is a place where a lot of pilgrims go. Here you can see.
Massimo,
See?
can I say something?
Yeah.
I have been riding in Italy in many beautiful places. I have been riding in the US, in France, in Spain, in many beautiful places. But the arrival in Pitigliano, when you turn right, you go around the bend, and boom, you have this view here. It's still something that makes me, say wow every single time, and I've done it 50 times. So on day 9, we ride from Orvieto to Sovana. Sovana is next to Pitigliano. We stop to Pitigliano for lunch. And this is usually a super great ride that has a lot of climbs in the morning, but then ends with a great finish in Pitigliano and Sovana. Sorry, Massimo, keep going.
No, it's okay. Yeah, Pitigliano, Sovana, and Sorano. Sorano we go through on the extra loop for those who want to, and then we get to Sovana, which is the smallest town of the trip, having only 93 inhabitants in it. When on the last day we leave Sovana towards our the end of a journey in Porto Ercole, we go through Saturnia, which is, as you can see, the natural spa, famous and used since the Romans, and is still like it is now, like you can see it now. The entrance, of course, is free of charge, and on the next, yeah, this is why they should make us pay to get in. Otherwise, all kind of people get into the spa and pose for questionable pictures. But we have some time to spend in the Saturnia baths, to sit and relax, and especially when we're there a bit off season, like in May or October, is a wonderful place to dip our legs in hot water before jumping back on our bikes and going up and down the last climbs towards the Argentario.
Massimo, honestly, it's much better when day 10 it's a little chilly, it's a little brisky,
so
it's not too hot.
Locals. So you don't have
so you
the
don't have the locals
going around in
and when you
speedos.
get to and when you go to Saturnia, you really want to get your legs into warm water. Again, this is when we go to Toscana. We are in Toscana already, this other part of Toscana. After that, we go, this is the wine. We arrive in the Argentario Peninsula. We hit the western coast of Italy in Toscana. And as you can see, Argentario, it's a promontory, it's a peninsula that is connected to mainland Italy by 3 stripes. The upper one, Il Tombolo di Giannella, it's a natural sandbar. The central one, where Orbetello, the city, lies in, it's artificial made. With our bikes, we ride through the forest, which is the lower one, which is called Il Tombolo della Feniglia. And actually, the last 3 miles of riding before arriving to destination are a glorious ride on a dirt, well-packed gravel through this forest here, up until we reach Porto Ercole. And at that point, Porto Ercole feels extremely Mediterranean. It does feel like you are on a little island nowhere in the middle of the Mediterranean. And this is where our celebration takes place. We take a nice photo to be framed next to the photo we take the very first day in Pesaro. And after 10 days of crossing Italy, we come to the final toast. Massimo, c'era da dire qualcosa sulle ricette della Toscana, che abbiamo perso lungo la strada?
Yeah, we lost one of the typical dishes we taste in Tuscany, which is the Aqua Cotta. Is a soup with very humble origins. Basically, it's stir-fried celery and onion, tomatoes, vegetable stock, and everything is poured over stale toasted bread with an egg, which was at the time one of the few sources of protein that the normal countryside family could afford. Also, for most of you that have been to Tuscany, you know well the pici and the cinghiale, and also the tortelli, which are a particular kind of ravioli you can find in Tuscany. Actually, they're very big ravioli because a portion usually is made by 5 or 6
servings.
Yeah, not many. In Tuscany also, between the Porto Ercole and Sovana, is the only place in Italy where we can find our cowboys. In Tuscany, they call them the butteri, because Tuscany has a long-standing tradition in beef cattle.
Allora, we are at the end of the presentation. I just want to say hello to a couple of friends who joined later. Gianfranco, Jeff Geyer. Ciao.
Ciao,
Welcome.
Marcello.
Welcome. Ciao. Also David Macmillan. I don't see him because he has not his camera on, but ciao. Also Tony Furio and many others that I know that are on right now. Geoff, I don't know what Geoff went, but I'm very happy to see you. You should understand that this is almost Geoff, almost 2 years without being on Bike Across Italy, without being in Tuscany, without being with Massimo, and without being with you. I don't know if I can make through this. I will try. Brent is saying yes, Brent. It's not easy. I had the best job in the world, and now it's gone. So I hope things turn out, a little better in the future. John and Jenny, yes, I miss you, and so I can go back to my great days in the office and enjoy explaining and sharing Italy with you guys. So at this point, Lauren, if you don't have anything else to say, Eli, good evening, Eli.
I just want to see if anybody has any questions. You can either type them into the chat box, or I can turn you to. Go ahead, Marcello.
Questions and stories.
Yes, that'd be great. Yeah, some Bike Across Italy stories. That'd be wonderful.
Question and stories.
Yeah.
Eli, come on.
Okay, so you can unmute yourself if you'd like to share a memory of Bike Across Italy, of Marcello, of Massimo, of any of the places you visited. Go ahead and you can unmute yourself, or any specific questions. We'll take those now. Forza ragazzi. Favorite meal on Bike Across Italy. One thing we've always called this trip is the Hilltown tour. I think of all the trips we do, almost every town we visit is other than, let's say, well, Genga's not a hill town. Pitigliano, that's a hill town. But almost every place we visit is considered an Italian hill town, which I think is kind of
Why?
Go ahead, Marcello. You can elaborate.
Because before you had a rifle or a gun, you could only defend you could only defend your town if you could pour hot boiling olive oil on your enemies as they were climbing up to the walls trying to conquer your city. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's very difficult to conquer a castle which is way up, rather than sweep away a town that it's in a plain. This is why people built the towns where they were easier to be defended. All you need is olive oil and a fire. You you make your oil boiling and you pour it on the enemies that are climbing your city walls.
Hopefully it wasn't Molinello oil, because that's too precious to pour on the enemy. It was, hopefully it was cheap olive oil.
We have a different perception of olive oil right now.
Right.
So we did it one year. I did that tour twice, and I think Marcello, you were with me, and we were there for the Cherry Festival, but we were also there for the Niggy Amelia, the car race. Remember that came through?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe. And
the Giro d'Italia.
And we saw the Giro d'Italia. So we had all those three on the same tour. That was like the trifecta.
Perfetto. Because May, it's the month in which the most important cycling stage race takes place in the world, which is of course the Giro d'Italia. May 15, the Cherry went on, and also we crossed paths with the Mille Miglia, 1,000 miles, one of those open road vintage car races that takes place in Italy in the month of May. So that was almost the perfect trip. Why is it almost?
What about you, Marcello? What's your favorite? I mean, you already said one of your favorite views, but what are some of the other favorite, places, people?
Stories of bike across Italy.
Yeah.
There are many, and one of them is one of our. We are in Gubbio, day 4 for the Cherry Festival. The Cherry Festival, we did not explain it very well, but if you're interested, I can send you a link to a very nice video that explains about it. It's a festival that is 900 years old. It involves all the town. It's a great party day and blah, blah, blah. And we had this woman who could play trombone. And, throughout the day, you have 3 or 4 bands that go around town playing music. And this woman just jumped in, grabbed the trombone and started to play with the local band. And that was really a high. That really was a high. She just jumped in and filled in and started to play the trombone in a festival that is about 900 years old. That was quite a thing. That was very, very interesting.
Great.
Who
Anybody
else?
Have a great bike across Italy story? Henry, did you do bike across Italy?
Why? No. About the same place. No.
You have to unmute yourself, Henry.
Yeah, I did it with Marcello. One of the great times, somebody was talking about the car race. We were going up a hill. I don't know if anybody mentioned there were hills on this ride. And we were going up a hill. And at the top, we noticed that there were bales of hay and stuff around all the poles and whatever. And
Gubbio.
And we start going down the hill, and all of a sudden there's this little BMW screaming up the hill all over the road, not regarding us at all. And it was the day before the race, and the locals were all taking a ride up the hill, and we're trying to wend our way down the other side with all these cars coming at us.
That was to go to Gubbio, because on the other side of the last hill before Gubbio, they were practicing the rally, the car race of the next day.
That's great. I remember one of my very first trips. I was leaving Jenga, and I just looked out. And maybe you experienced this too, Marcello, because it happens. It was May, and I looked out and I thought there was just, I don't even know, it was this enormous red flag or something. And as I got closer, it was a poppy field, and it was, you probably experienced this, Marcello, but it was just, I don't know how big it was. It was enormous. It was just, and it was thick. It wasn't, there was no green to be seen. So of course, photo op like crazy. And I'll just never forget, we just were there for a while, just taking photographs of, in the poppy field. And the same thing, of course, happens all the time with sunflowers. That's a little more common, but a field of poppies like that, I don't think I had seen or will ever see again. As so often happens on a bicycle trip, those kind of moments, but that was really special.
Anyway, to go back to the topics of tonight's event, speaking about the wines, if you're interested in any of these wines, this one is Gaio Spino, one of my favorite white wines of Italy or of the world, by far in the top 5 list, Verdicchio from Le Marche. Or if you want to try this very extremely tannic experience with the Sagrantino di Montefarco, or if you want to try the Italian version, high-hand, of the Bordolese brand, this is a so-called Super Tuscan, and if you're interested in the story, I can explain about it. This comes from southern Toscana by Chiappini, Bolgheri Superiori. I can give you more details. I can put some of the details about these wines on the Ciclismo Classico website. For example, Chiappini has as a sort of wine club where they give you all the updates on the production, on the deals, on whatever information it is on the wine, and it is very interesting. And all these producers are local producers. They're not owned by, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against, come si dice, the big corporation, but all of these are local producers who gave value to their own little piece of soil. And we as Ciclismo Classico, we try to give visibility, importance, and value to this kind of products of Italy. We love, come si dice, Antinori, we love the huge producers, but we try to have people know the small producers of Italy.
One thing you forgot to mention is the Toady Challenge, which we no longer do.
No.
But raise your hand if you've been. That was a while ago. If you did the Toady Challenge, that was quite a little discovery. Yes, it was around. We started. Let's see. The first trip we did back across Italy was 1990. And when we were scouting, we knew the regular way to go up to Toady. But then, as you know, the fun part about scouting is, of course, exploring. So we discovered this wall that went literally up the backside of Toady. And Toady is really, of all the hill towns, quite a promontory in terms of a hill. It really is almost, itself a peak. And so there's this climb that goes up the backside of Toady. I think we measured it to be a kilometer, right? It's like a kilometer. It's a solid kilometer. And I think it's got
1.2 kilometers, average 18%.
18%.
With no
rest.
switchbacks.
Right. So it's straight up. Right.
Straight up.
It's like I've done out Washington twice, long time ago. But the trick of it, I just tell people, you have to go really slow. And we don't do it anymore. It was just, I think, right? Or we do. Do we do it still?
What's the secret? No, we sometimes offer as
well,
an
the
option.
secret is the secret is balance. The secret is strength and balance.
Start the Toady Challenge as slow as you can.
Right.
And never ever accelerate.
Right, never. You just exactly. It's a very steep hill. Is a very meditative practice. You just, if you have, it definitely requires strength, requires balance, and it requires a lot of faith. So it's a very spiritual, strength-defying time. But raise your hand if you did the Toady Challenge? If you didn't do it all by bike, that's fine. Well, that's great. Well, congratulations, Toady Challengers. That's great.
Bene, molto bene. Well, it's extremely nice for me to be back in this situation and be able to speak English and be able to see faces like Tony, Antonio Furio. You look in great shape. How are you?
This trip has his name on it, by the way. So Tony's definitely.
I'm well, thank you. I will say, I exclusively use for the lentil, the Castellucci. I use that exclusively because you mentioned it before. It really is a fantastic lentil to eat.
But you haven't done this trip, right? Have you done this trip yet, Antonio?
No, I haven't. But I use those lentils. I can get them in my neighborhood.
Okay.
So I do use those lentils, and they are fabulous.
Hey, I'm coming to New York tomorrow, Tony. Maybe I can say hello.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love it.
I'm bringing my son back. He's gonna go live in New York, so I'm driving down to New York City. I'll text you.
Okay, sounds good.
And again, I want to say thank you to all the alumni that have joined tonight's event. Henry, Brent, the Millers, Steve Bader. I don't see you, but I'm sure I've seen
He's
you
here
before.
somewhere.
Eli, and
Oh, and
everybody else
one
who
more
have-
thing about Bike Across Italy, by the way, it launched a whole series. You know, this was the first one, but of course, so now we have Bike Across Italy, Bike Across Southern Italy, which is basically from Puglia to Calabria, and that's a 4-region trip. And we have Bike Across France and Bike Across Belgium. So it really launched a whole series of what else we have? We have Bike Across England. We have Bike Across, what else, Marcello? We have many Bike Across Ireland this year, which we still have slated on the calendar. And we do have a Bike Across Italy this fall. We have one date available. We have people signing up. So we're, we'll see, we can't predict anything, but we're hoping. We're really,
I'm actually launching a bike across my backyard. If you wish.
Yeah.
There has been a Bike Across Spain.
Bike Across Spain, yeah, Bike Across
Twice.
Spain. Yeah. So that really became a real a nice little collection of tours for us, and people. I personally love biking across things or around islands is one of my favorite kind of themes in terms of cycling. But yes, so Bike Across Italy was really the mothership of all of our Bike Across tours.
I guess Marcello is with me, but you name a place that will bike across it or around it. I mean, we don't have
Whatever.
Bike across
we
Canada,
go.
okay. Bike across New Hampshire, bike across Vermont, which will happen, by the way.
Bike across whatever.
Yeah, Bike Across Southern Italy is another great. They're both.
No,
super.
bellissimo.
Sorry.
Allora, I have taken Bike Across Italy too with my friends 2
Yeah.
years ago. Every year with my friends, we take 7 or 8 days cycling vacation. And Bike Across Italy was number one in our cycling experience. Polignano, Matera, all the way to the West Coast.
I think there are a lot
That's
of
a great
people
trip.
a lot of alumni that have done that trip twice or more than twice. I've done it twice. It's, easy to do it again.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful trip.
Yeah.
Bike Across Italy, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's very rich.
Yeah.
It is very rich. It's way richer than what you have seen tonight with my very poor slideshow. It has a lot more, and a lot of people actually absorbs it once they get home. They start to understand and absorb it a little bit later, because it's a very intense experience. 10 days, every day you move. There's only 1-2 night stay in Spello in the middle of the trip, and it's very intense because of the cycling and because of the things you see. So a lot of people, write me and say, you know what? I'm starting to understand Bike Across Italy now after 3 weeks that I'm home.
I think what I remember noticing again. I think I don't know when I started noticing it, but it became a theme for me visually because I paint and draw and photograph. So what I thought was really interesting about Italy in general is that whatever the soil is, whatever color is the soil, is the color of the buildings, right? So like on Bike Across Italy, that becomes really evident because when you start in Le Marche, there's a lot of limestone and all the buildings are made out of limestone. Of course, Assisi is just white and pearly colored. And then as you go to the west, there's more of the clay in the soil. And you really see that if you just take note next time you're traveling all over Europe, of course, but Italy in particular, because it utilizes stones so much, that you'll literally see, that's why the towns I think have that aesthetic, is because the buildings were made, of the stone and the soil. And so there's this wonderful harmony, which I just loved. And that's something in Bike Across Southern Italy you see as well. Of course, the Trulli, Pitigliano, the huge limestone going on there. And then as you move to Calabria, of course, you don't have the same level of limestone. So those are the kind of things that I really love too.
In my opinion, I think that you can read Bike Across Italy with so many different keys. It could be, as you said, just say that the color of the buildings. It could be the art. It could be the culinary. It could be the language spoken by the people and the way they introduce themselves to you. And I've been lucky enough to did it few times, and I've seen that those differences in on the faces of the guests at the end of the tour, which is one of the most amazing things at the end of the Bike Across Italy. I did Bike Across Southern Italy just once, and other than being an well, it's not intermediate, it's
I think that's
yeah,
sure.
it's advanced.
Hard, yeah.
On in many points a bit more radical, because some parts of Italy crossed by that tour are very different from any other parts of Italy. Of course, Puglia is gorgeous, and when you get to Palinuro, but in between there's the Calabria, there's the Arboresh region where people is speaking an Albanese dialect, and not even Italian, and you find a double language on street signs. So it's surprisingly radical and fantastic, I would say. And it's also quite hard when you have to go up and down those climbs right around the corner. I remember getting after Matera, you got 3 days of challenging vertical climbs.
Bellissimo. Beh.
Well, I think that's the advantage of
Right.
when you have any kind of longer journey, any kind of like, well, a Bike Across Belgium too is another trip we do. But I think that's sort of the advantage of doing something that's a multi-regional trip, particularly in Europe, because of the, because of the cultural changes and the dialect changes and the culinary changes that happen in such a short, in a 300 or 400 mile span, which doesn't happen quite that quickly in the United States. So I think it's that's interesting as well.
Laura, can I say something before I faint?
Certo, sì, perché fa tardi lì.
Esatto, I'm drinking. Well, thanks for joining us. Please write me and Massimo for any possible question about Bike Across Italy, about wine, about food and cultural, come si dice, questions. If we don't know about it, we'll make it up, so you will have an answer no matter what. What I miss.
And Marcello's going to be back Marcello's going to be back in a few weeks. He's going to do a presentation about gravel. We're going to do a gravel. We're going to talk about the Eroica. We're going to talk about our gravel trip in Deerfield, Massachusetts. It's going to be a little gravel show, so that should be fun.
Yay.
And that what?
I said, yay, that's an amazing tour.
Yes.
Eli can tell you about that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The Eroica is amazing. I know, it's a great trip. We're doing.
So to finish my speech before fainting is
okay.
I miss my paycheck because of the pandemic. That's
please. Yes. Contributions welcome, and you'll get a link tomorrow.
Wait. But I miss sharing my beautiful country with all of you. This is what I miss the most. I can lower my level of my life a little bit, so it can accommodate to my current paycheck, but it's very hard to cope with the fact that I no longer have people to share my country with. Does it make sense, Lauren?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, of course. We miss, yes, I feel the same way. I mean, I'm feeling a little thankful that we can do them domestic trips here, because I think if I had to go through a whole year of not doing any trips, on my level too, it's been something to look forward to. So I know. Yeah,
it's like you can't drink good wine, so you drink beer. You can't come to Italy, so you do your domestic trips.
Right. I know. We miss it so much, and hopefully this fall, we don't. Again, hopefully, no certainty, but we really are hoping for the fall for things that people getting vaccinated and things happening. So we've got some movement for the fall. So let's just cross our fingers and pray and hope things go well for all of us. And we do definitely look forward to seeing you all again very soon. My pals, my family, you guys are my family. I miss you very much. Well, thank you so much, Marcello. Thank you, Massimo. Thank you everyone for coming. You'll get an email tomorrow to follow up with some additional links to the trip. And like I said, PayPal, if you can be so generous to our boys there. And we'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to have a neat one. We're going to go to New Hampshire, to the Bee Lady of New Hampshire. And she's going to give us a tour of her apiary, it's very interesting. It's a Slovenian style apiary, which I didn't even know there was a variation of any kind of apiary. But she's, again, a world traveler, went to high school with her, happened to discover that. But she's another European fan, but she brought a little bit back of Europe back to New Hampshire. And she started this little apiary. So it's something that we visit on tour. And all of our domestic trips, I've tried very hard to bring a lot of the same kind of curiosity that, we're stirring of the curiosity that we do in Europe. And, New England is a little Europe, and New Hampshire, as Brent Johnson said, reminded him of Tuscany. So Brent's going to get really tired of me saying that over and over again, but you did say it. So come to Southern New Hampshire. Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course.
Brent, can you move out of the screen a little bit? Can you have Jen getting
Hi, Jen.
into the center of the screen?
Hello.
Oh, very good. Much better.
Jen.
Thank you, Brent.
Well,
Ciao, Jen.
Thank you all so much. See you guys later. I'll be calling you tomorrow, Antonio. Ci vediamo presto. We'll see you next
Ciao,
week.
Toady.
And well, come back to the Ciclismo show, and Marcello will be back in a few weeks.